For the last 80 years, the world economy has felt a bit like a heavyweight boxing match with only one champ. A handful of wealthy nations, with the United States in the lead, set the rules, controlled the ring, and took home the biggest prizes. But what if I told you a whole new crew of contenders is not just in the ring, but is already ahead on points? What if the ref is about to change the rules of the fight entirely? This isn't some far-off prediction. It's happening right now. A massive shift in global power is underway, moving from the familiar, established economies of the West to a dynamic, ambitious group of emerging nations. This group is rapidly rewriting the playbook for trade, finance, and technology. And whether you realize it or not, their rise will affect your life, your wallet, and your future in ways you might not expect. To get just how big this change is, let's do a quick rewind. For decades after World War II, the global economy was run by a small, exclusive club, the Group of Seven, or G7. These countries, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, were the industrial powerhouses. They controlled the world's top financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Their currencies were the most stable, and the US dollar became the undisputed king, the global reserve currency everyone needed to do business with. This arrangement created a ton of wealth and stability, but mostly for the members of the club. If you were in, life was good. But for most of the world's population in so-called developing countries, the system often felt like a game with rigged rules. Their economic fate was often tied to decisions made in Washington, London, or Tokyo. This was the world we all grew up in. But quietly, behind the scenes, the foundations of this world were starting to crack. The first rumbles of this economic earthquake came from an unlikely place, a 2001 research paper from Goldman Sachs. An economist came up with a catchy name for four huge, fast-growing economies: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. He called them the BRICS. At first, it was just a Wall Street buzzword, a term for a hot investment opportunity. But the leaders of these nations saw something bigger. They saw a shared identity. They were all massive, populous countries with incredible resources and a common frustration with a global system they felt was stacked against them. So what began as an acronym became a political alliance. In 2009, they held their first official summit. A year later, they invited South Africa to join, adding the S to BRICS. For years, the world watched with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Was this a real power block or just a group for photo ops? Then in 2024 and 2025, the game completely changed. BRICS went on a massive expansion spree, welcoming economic heavyweights like Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia. Today, this expanded group isn't just a contender, it's a force that can't be ignored. So what makes this new bloc so powerful? Let's just look at the raw numbers because they are stunning. First, people. The G7 nations represent about 10% of the world's population. The expanded BRICS Plus bloc. With its new members and partners, it now represents over half of humanity, making up about 56% of the world population. That's a demographic tidal wave that translates into huge consumer markets and massive workforces. But here's the most shocking stat: economic output. For years, the G7 was easily the richest club on earth. Not anymore. As of 2025, when you measure the economy by something called purchasing power parity, which is a fancy way of comparing what money actually buys in different countries, the BRICS bloc has officially overtaken the G7. The expanded BRICS Plus group now accounts for about 44% of the world's GDP by this measure, while the G7's share has fallen to around 28%. And that gap is only getting wider. According to IMF forecasts for 2025, the BRICS nations are set to grow at an average rate of 3.8%, while the G7 is expected to manage a sluggish 1.0%. That means the BRICS Plus bloc is growing more than 3 times faster. India is a star performer, with projected growth over 6.6%, while China is forecast to grow at 4.8%. Meanwhile, some of Europe's biggest economies like Germany are barely growing at all, with a forecast of just 0.2%. This isn't just about numbers on a chart. It's a real-world shift in who makes what and who sells what. These emerging economies are no longer just shipping out raw materials. They're on the cutting edge of tech. China is a leader in electric vehicles and renewable energy. India has a booming digital economy and a super tech-savvy population with a median age of just 28. These nations are leapfrogging the old stages of development and jumping straight to the technologies of the future. So what's fueling this tectonic shift? It's not just about economic growth. It's a deliberate political project, and at the heart of it is one of the biggest trends in finance, de-dollarization. For decades, the US dollar's role as the world's reserve currency has given America what's been called an exorbitant privilege. Because oil, wheat, and pretty much every other major commodity are priced in dollars, countries have had to hoard massive reserves of US dollars just to trade. This creates a constant artificial demand for the dollar, which lets the US borrow money more cheaply and use sanctions as a powerful geopolitical weapon. When the US and its allies froze hundreds of billions of Russia's dollar reserves in 2022, it sent a shockwave through the emerging world. The message was loud and clear. If this can happen to a nuclear power like Russia, it can happen to anyone. That one move kicked the search for an alternative into overdrive. BRICS nations are now actively working to sidestep the dollar. They are settling trades directly in their own currencies. In late 2025, Russia's finance minister announced that nearly all trade between Russia and China, over 99%, is now done in rubles and yuan. India and China are also increasingly trading in rupees and yuan. These aren't just symbolic moves. They are the first steps in building a new financial system that operates outside of Western control. The bloc is developing its own payment systems like BRICS Pay, and even talking about a common digital currency that could one day challenge global networks like SWIFT. This is where it gets personal. The rise of new economic powers and the slow chipping away at the dollar's dominance will have real consequences for people living in the West. First, your cost of living could go up. A weaker dollar would make anything imported more expensive. That means everything from the phone in your pocket to the clothes on your back, much of it made in emerging markets, could see a price hike. Second, borrowing money could get more expensive. For years, the world's demand for US dollars has helped keep interest rates in America artificially low. If that global demand for dollars fades, the US government and you could face higher borrowing costs on everything from mortgages and car loans to the national debt. Third, the global balance of power is being redrawn. We're moving from a unipolar world led by the US to a multipolar world with many centers of influence. This could mean a more competitive and unpredictable planet where trade disputes and economic friction become more common as old powers and new powers jostle for their spot. We're already seeing this happen. A few years ago, Ford closed a car factory in Brazil, which many took as a bad sign for the region. But shortly after, the Chinese electric vehicle giant BYD announced it was taking over the plant to build EVs. It's a perfect metaphor for the shift taking place. One industrial giant from the old world leaves, and a new one from the emerging world steps right in to take its place. Okay, let's pump the brakes for a second. The complete takeover by the emerging world isn't a done deal, and the West isn't about to collapse overnight. The BRICS bloc has its own serious internal challenges. It's a wildly diverse group of countries that don't always see eye to eye. You have democracies like Brazil and India sharing a table with autocratic states like China and Russia. Real tensions exist, especially between India and China, who are rivals for influence across Asia and the global South. To be a truly united force, they'll have to bridge some of these deep divides. And don't count the US dollar out just yet. It still makes up around 58% of all global foreign exchange reserves. Its dominance is baked into the global financial system, and there isn't a single currency ready to replace it tomorrow. The G7 nations, as a group of advanced economies, still lead in terms of nominal GDP and are at the forefront of R&D in critical fields like AI and green energy. This transition to a new world order will be more of a slow burn than a sudden explosion. But the direction of travel is unmistakable. The world is changing faster than ever, and understanding these huge economic currents is no longer just for experts. If you want to keep making sense of how these global trends will affect your money and your future, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. We are living through one of the most pivotal moments in modern history. The economic order that defined the 20th century is making way for something new, more complicated, and much more decentralized. The rise of emerging economies, with the BRICS alliance at the forefront, isn't just about GDP charts and trade stats. It's about a fundamental redistribution of power on a global scale. This isn't a story of us versus them. Our global economy is so interconnected that the prosperity of emerging markets can create new opportunities for everyone. But it does mean the era of a few countries calling all the shots is coming to an end. The future will be negotiated by a much larger and more diverse group of players around the table. The great rebalancing has already started. The question isn't if. This will reshape our world, but how, and whether we're ready for the answer. History rhymes. Power rebrands. Stay inquisitive.